Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephanie Kuzy, Member of Parliament for Calgary-Midnapore, Shadow Minister for Democratic Institutions, and former Executive Director of the Manning Initiative Common Sense Calgary. What a treat we have for you this afternoon. These two people are at the center of politics in Canada today. A graduate of the Calgary School at the University of Calgary, like myself, if I may say so, Mercedes Stevenson interned at the Pentagon and studied at MIT. She went on to host a weekly public affairs program in Toronto and later became a parliamentary reporter for CTV News Channel and host of the political affairs program Power Play. So we all know that she will ask the tough questions. Being a conservative to me has always meant truth, perseverance, hard work, and family values. The person that I am now introducing is no stranger to these principles. The son of a nurse and librarian, he was raised like you and me, school down the street, and tough decisions around the dinner table that drove him to succeed and to fight for average Canadians. First elected in 2004, at the age of 25, he defeated Lord Nystrom, the longest-standing MP in the House of Commons at that time. But he didn't stop there. In 2011, he went on to become the youngest speaker in Canadian history. In 2017, he was chosen as the leader of Canada's Conservatives and has worked tirelessly exposing the carbon tax, fighting against the deficit, and traveling from coast to coast to coast to unify and to motivate Conservatives. I have a message for each and every Conservative in this room today. Don't despair. Don't despair, because this man and his team, which I am proud to be a part of, are working day and night to return Canada to a nation of opportunity for all that we can be proud of on the world stage. He is ready to lead Canadians into a new era of government, an era where he and his wife Jill can feel good about the country that they are building for their 5 children, Madeline, Grace, Henry, Thomas, and Mary. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so proud to present to you the leader of Canada's Conservatives and the next Prime Minister of Canada, Andrew Scheer.
Thank you very much. That was great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mercy. Thanks very much. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure. I love coming to this event. It's got a long history now, and some people might not know this, but I got my start in politics thanks to Preston Manning.
I didn't know. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was an intern. I got an internship one year, and that was my foray into politics, and worked on in the office when Preston Manning was leader of the party. So it was my introduction into politics was thanks to him, and so it's great to see this event carry on that legacy.
Well, and we're so excited to be here and have the chance to find out a few things from you, both professional, personal, election year, very exciting. Kind of a busy week, I think.
Couple things going on
both
this
have
week.
a little bit of circles under the eyes after that. We will be also taking some questions from the audience as we go on. So if you have them, you can either go to one of the 2 mics that are in the room, or you can send me a message on the app, which I will try to remember to check. Wave your phone if you're sending me messages. I'm not seeing them. Look for my name on here. Apparently that's how this works. And then you send it, and I can ask your question to Mr. Scheer. So we've had a very busy week in Ottawa. The government you almost got them on that vote.
Yes.
It was close. Lots of procedural shenanigans, lots of polls. In fact, one that had you ahead of Justin Trudeau as preferred leader, I think, for the first time that we've seen that. Conservatives back into majority territory. When you look forward in this election year, what do you think your biggest challenge is, and what's your biggest advantage?
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting question. It's always a challenge for a leader of the opposition to get to every part of the country, to get his or her message out, to articulate the ideas that will carry the country into the future. There's a natural advantage to being in government. The Prime Minister has an easier time of just practical things, logistical things. Getting to and from a place is easier for the Prime Minister than it is for the Leader of the Opposition in the build-up to the election. The election puts everyone on a bit more of an even playing field, but in the months ahead, there's just that natural advantage. So there's that. Obviously going up against someone who has certainly enjoyed a celebrity status image in the public for so long now has been an advantage to him, but it's also proving now to be a disadvantage, I believe, and so for him. And so the advantage that I have now is I believe people are seeing the real Justin Trudeau now for the first time. That a lot of things that he claimed to be committed to, that he tried to portray himself as, that the facade has fallen and the real Justin Trudeau is coming out. And so now it's easier for me to start to provide that alternative. Now more and more Canadians are saying, okay, well, we would like to hear your plan for the economy. We would like to hear your plan for the energy sector. So now, because we've already made some announcements on that, there's more reception for what we are offering Canadians.
You talk about who is the real Justin Trudeau, and the country has had a better chance to get to know him through the process of obviously him being in the public eye from the time that he was a small child. Obviously, as well, then Leader of the Liberal Party, Prime Minister. You were the Speaker, you're in the eye. People don't get to know you the same way. Leader of the Opposition now. Who is the real Andrew Scheer?
The real Andrew Scheer is a person who grew up in a very ordinary household, the type of upbringing that I think most Canadians can see themselves reflected in. My mother worked full-time, 12-hour shifts at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. My dad was worked in the newsroom and then a librarian at the Ottawa Citizen. So we had a very comfortable upbringing, but we had to make some tough choices. My parents were able to give us, my two sisters and I, most of the things we wanted, but not everything. And if we wanted to take a road trip in the summer, it might mean that we couldn't do something else later. We didn't have a car growing up. That was a choice they made they had to prioritize some of the other things some of the other challenges that we face. So I think that is a good reflection of what many Canadians have experienced themselves, and that sense of nothing comes to you. You have to go out and work for it. You have to earn it. You have to work hard and play by the rules. And seeing my parents do that for so long really taught me the value of hard work, of being responsible, of making choices that you don't just get to get have other people pay for things for you. And you have to go out and work for that yourself. I met my wife Jill. She's from Regina. I think she's here in the audience today.
It's our backstage.
There she is. There she is. She's from Regina. We met in university. And I moved out to Regina to finish my program because she was finishing up her education degree. So what I'm all about is just making it easier for families to get ahead. I see so many families that do everything right. They work so hard. Sometimes they work 2 jobs. They try to put enough money away to send their kids to a sports camp. They save up for a vacation. And there's a real sense in this generation, in this period of time in Canada, that people are working hard but not getting ahead. And when I look back at my family's history, my grandmother's family, my mother grew up on Cawthra Road in Mississauga, back when that was a dirt road. And my grandfather was a blue-collar worker at Massey Ferguson. My grandmother stayed home and raised 9 children in a very small house in the rural part of Mississauga. And the next generation, my aunts and uncles, had it better than my grandparents. They were able to buy nicer houses. They had more stable employment. They were able to offer their kids more than they themselves had. And then my generation, the cousins, 30 some odd cousins on my branch of the family tree, we had it even better than our parents did. We had opportunities. We went to university. We had doors open to us that weren't there for our parents' generation. And when I talk to people between the ages of 20 and 30 and even some older than that, there's a real fear that that's not going to happen now for that generation, that they're not going to have the same quality of life that their parents had. They're not going to have the stable employment. They're not going to have the same confidence in their retirement plan or their pension plans. They're not going to be able to afford the same type of house that they themselves grew up in. And there's a real sense of frustration around that, and that's some of the things that I'm going to be addressing in the campaign. One
of the biggest challenges for any politician is to connect with people outside Ottawa. And certainly all of us in Ottawa, whether it's the press or parties or staffers, we end up in what we call the Ottawa bubble, where you get this sort of self-reflecting, positive feedback system where everything is amplified in a way that it may not be for people living in other parts of the country who are going about their normal lives and not obsessed with politics like we are. Obviously, money in people's pockets, a sense of stability, and their ability to feel that, as you say, their kids can have a better life than they did, play a big role in how people vote. And in this most recent budget, the Liberals, you see that reflection from obviously a different ideological perspective, but money for millennials to buy homes, money for seniors, appealing to that sense. So heading into this election, from a conservative perspective, how do you address that sense of anxiety that's out there among voters right now? And what do you plan to offer? Not asking for your platform, obviously, but how do you compete against a government which is addressing those same priorities and those same concerns, but in a very different way by offering money that people can put in their pockets?
Well, first I should point out that there's no credibility to what Justin Trudeau put in his budget this week. This was a multi-billion-dollar attempt to change the channel from an ongoing corruption scandal that he is embroiled in. He has had years to deal with these types of things, and now his last budget before the election, he's ramping up massive amounts of new spending, which leads to massive new deficits, all resulting in higher taxes if he's reelected. So I don't put any faith in anything he's put in that budget. And when you look at how it's structured, a lot of it is back-ended anyway. So it's not, a lot of the program spending is coming into effect years down the road, won't actually, even if it was successful in doing what he wants it to do, wouldn't take place for years down the road. The difference, though, between a Liberal approach and a Conservative approach and a Justin Trudeau approach versus my approach is a fundamental realization of where prosperity comes from. And Liberals think that it comes from government, and I believe that free people making free decisions, buying and selling freely, making their own decisions, always produces better outcomes than when government tries to intervene in the economy. So a great example of this is when we talk about millennials and housing. This is something that I hear a lot about. And we talked about the anxiety about the next generation having it as good or better than the previous. Housing is a big part of that. Where is someone who is 25 years old today going to find the types of income that would allow them to purchase a 3-bedroom detached house in Mississauga, Brampton, Scarborough, Greater Vancouver area? You know, there are regions in this country where that is just, there's no path to getting that. And so for the Liberals to come and only look at the demand side, you know, they've put some program in there, but they've done nothing to increase supply. And you can have more and more dollars chasing the same number of units, and the prices will continue to go up. What we want to do, and what we'll be talking about in more detail, you talked about the campaign platform, we'll be more specific later on, but working with municipalities and provinces to bring in more units, increase supply. If you don't have a balanced approach to the housing sector, then you're going to have more and more dollars chasing the same number of units, and what happens? Prices go up. That's basic economics that Trudeau doesn't understand. There are hundreds of, you heard it here first. When you look at some of the figures about the amount of money that's built into a new unit coming on the market, that is all caused by regulations, by municipal timelines and provincial timelines. In some areas, it can take 5 to 7 years to get a new development approved and units on the market. So we've been working with experts in the industry of how the federal government can play a leadership role into addressing that side of it. That would have a better outcome than borrowing money, raising taxes, and spending that money. So having more market-oriented solutions is always the preferred way to get a better outcome.
And according to Global News, also organized crime and money laundering in some markets, driving up real estate prices, which brings me to our next topic. And I'm going to look at my phone here because it's blowing up with people messaging. I'm not checking Twitter, I promise, as we do this. But when you look abroad, it's a very complex environment right now. You have Donald Trump in the United States, unpredictable. You have China, not a great relationship with Canada right now. Saudi Arabia, you still have concerns about ISIS, you have increasing concerns about neo-Nazis and white supremacists, violent attacks like we saw in New Zealand. When you look at the world, what kind of message do you want to send about what a conservative foreign policy would look like if you were in government?
And you're right to mention all those things. It is going to be a challenge for Canada, I believe, for years to come. I don't think this is something that is just a blip on the radar. I think freedom-loving governments and politicians and people who believe in the stability of our international associations, that believe in respectful dialogue and openness and tolerance and really fundamental equalities between all people, have to work together to really ensure that those more negative and dangerous elements in the world don't gain a greater prominence than they may have already. I think it's clear under Justin Trudeau that our foreign policy has been set way back. I mean, he likes to say when he first got elected that Canada's back. Well, he's put us back now after years of disasters on the world stage. And I don't think it comes as a surprise that after starting off so flat-footed, a lot of people talk about Donald Trump, but remember, Justin Trudeau has had problems with other allies, traditional allies that we normally have excellent relationships with. He angered Japan and Australia when he walked out of his erratic behavior at the TPP talks. We all remember the effect of his visit to India and what that had on the world. And I don't think that when you're dealing with a country like China and you've got all these examples backing down to Donald Trump on NAFTA, the effects of his trip to India, angering our traditional allies in Japan and Australia, other types of examples that I don't believe that they think that they're dealing with a serious person. And then the final... And this point is very, very important. The effect of this SNC-Lavalin corruption affair on our foreign policy as it relates to China is very, very profound. We have a very tense situation with the CEO of Huawei being, with the extradition process, and our response as a government, a Canadian government, has been: we don't interfere in the rule of law. We don't interfere in criminal court cases. We respect the independence of our judiciary. That was the message to China. Then, a couple weeks later, there's Justin Trudeau interfering in a criminal court case, putting pressure on the Attorney General to get a better outcome for his well-connected friends. That, I believe, is a big part of why this situation with China has further deteriorated. So a conservative approach to foreign policy is speaking loudly and proudly for fundamental human rights, for democratic principles, against those who would sow division and fear in the world and use their power to make aggressive moves against their neighbors, and not being afraid if we anger a few people at the UN or other groups if we are standing up for fundamental principles.
Okay, so let's get to some harder questions on that. China. Difficult to deal with. How would you go about handling the current situation, both in terms of Huawei and also canola, now that China is no longer accepting exports? How do you deal with the Chinese when they are so much more powerful as an economic force, and Canada to them is take it or leave it?
That's going to be a difficult. It's going to be a difficult file, absolutely, and that is one of the things that is very apparent to me on many different fronts, that the files that will require a tremendous amount of wisdom and hard work and finding some innovative solutions for the problems that I will inherit is something that is impressed upon me every day. The issue with China, I think, first of all, has to start off with we need a prime minister that does not admire the basic dictatorship of China and understands that while China is an important trading partner, and we absolutely, people who have come from China have helped build Canada and part of our vibrant society, we have to also recognize that the government in China has a much different world view than we do. There is not the same dedication to anywhere near the democratic institutions or principles that we have, and that they play by a different set of rules. This is one of the reasons why I was opposed to Justin Trudeau attempting to start free trade talks with China, because you develop free trade relationships with countries that you have trust and large areas of commonality. So we have confidence in European courts. If a Canadian company needs to go to court to get free treatment in a European country, we have confidence that we'll be treated the same because we've been allies and partners and we've worked together in so many other relationships. Despite the recent challenges with the Trump administration, generally speaking, we have the same confidence with the United States as well, that contract law will be upheld on both sides of the border. And when you've established that trust, that's when you go and you then enhance your trading relationships and you get those free trade deals. When you're dealing with a country like China, with state-owned enterprises, without the same commitment to the rule of law, with all kinds of things like non-tariff barriers, I don't believe we're ready for that then. But we do need to be strong, and I think part of that has to do with behavior and comportment, and that's on the Prime Minister as a leader. And then it's also about ensuring that we have vibrant and robust relationships with our traditional trading partners, making sure that we have support of our international allies when we are dealing with something like the Huawei example. So those are things that we're going to continue to focus on. As it relates to canola, I represent a riding that has about 50% rural, or 50% rural component. I know how devastating this is, and it's another example of why we need serious leadership on this. While this current Liberal government has been seized with a scandal of their own making, we have seen our relationship further deteriorate with China. We've seen other issues affecting us. It's really too bad because people now, again, farmers in this situation are paying for the mistakes that Justin Trudeau has made because these things are linked.
We're going to go to questions in the audience in just a few minutes, so you know I haven't forgotten about you. But back here at home, you took some pretty serious criticism for the statement you put out after the mosque attacks in New Zealand for not using the word Muslims, for not, in your critics' eyes, condemning certain ideologies strongly enough. And you see groups like the Yellow Vests, you see some of the extremists who are in those groups, and it's tough to tell who's who because it's very fluid. How do you deal with the issues around that at home? How do you deal with the criticisms that you're not being tough enough on this, that you're not condemning it clearly enough? And how do you deal with the risk of that kind of a rising, not populism, but rising violence or advocating violence like we see in some of these groups?
Oh, I deal with it by pointing out that the criticisms are completely baseless. When you look at statements I've made condemning hateful ideologies, those who would promote any type of superiority of one race or religion over the others, I condemn that unequivocally. And the Conservative movement has repeatedly spoken out against those that incite people to hatred or to violence or in any way try to divide Canadians and polarize Canadians. You mentioned the statement I put out. My official statement absolutely did include the reference to the faith community that was attacked. But what was clear is that the Liberals had attempted to score cheap political points in a very disgusting manner. Their hypocrisy on this is unbelievable. You look at the statement, the initial tweets that were put out by Liberal Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale, former Liberal MP Jim Watson, Governor General of Canada, all had very similar types of messages that I had. I don't see any of the Liberals running around attacking those individuals. So I actually think that Canadians see through that and they see the disgusting politicization of a tragedy, and with so many innocent lives that were lost, and then seeing Liberals here try to score cheap political points. I think that turns off Canadians. People know that the Conservative Party is open and welcoming. We denounce any elements of society that would promote hate speech or, as I said, any type of hateful ideology, while at the same time promoting ourselves as an open and inclusive, welcoming party for people of all faiths, all backgrounds, all religions.
Before we start taking questions from the floor, when you look at the New Brunswick election, you see non-traditional right-wing party picking up votes. We've seen the Greens start to pick up votes. You're seeing Canadians turning away from the traditional big three in a way that we haven't before. And in particular for you, I think of the People's Party of Canada, because I doubt a lot of Conservative voters might swing Green, always possible though, but perhaps more likely to lose them to Maxime Bernier. How concerned are you about these anxieties we've talked about that people are feeling about their future and about the economy, the more openness and willingness to try a different kind of party than the traditional three, in terms of posing a potential election threat to you if they can just shave enough off to turn some of those ridings over potentially to the Liberals?
Well, it's always a challenge for political parties to keep believers in their particular movement united on the common ground. That was the essence of my leadership campaign, was that my goal would be to keep all the different kinds of Conservatives united on the common grounds that we can put forward to the Canadian people and be successful. And when people are anxious about the fact that tens of billions of dollars have left the energy sector and not a single kilometre of pipeline has been laid since Justin Trudeau has gotten elected, when they look at the hypocrisy of a government that punishes Western Canadian energy but allows imported oil from the United States and the Middle East into Canada, they get very upset, but they see our party being the champion for that. People who are anxious about the cost of living and how the carbon tax will affect their ability to get ahead, we are there for them. So I am confident, and when you look at the results of the recent by-elections, and you can see that the Conservative movement is united. It's clear that one individual didn't get what he wanted, and now has gone down a particular path. And the more he starts, his style and his, you talked about polarization and some of the messages that he has. He's made his choice. I made my choice to continue to offer a positive alternative, a vision for Canada based on Conservative principles, and that is fundamental. Fundamental in that is that Conservative policies solve the problems that we're all concerned about. We're all concerned about housing. We're all concerned about poverty. We're concerned about the integration of people coming from all over the world and how Canada can continue to be a welcoming and inclusive country. It's Conservative policies and principles that do that. Nothing lifts people out of poverty better than a Conservative government that is enhancing the free market, that is lowering taxes, getting government out of the way of those who want to work hard and grow a business or create something in their community. So that vision is a unifying vision, and I truly do believe that when people contrast that against Justin Trudeau and see that with the Conservative Party of Canada being that big tent open to people of all different backgrounds working with us, that we can and we will replace him in October and give Canadians the kind of government that they deserve.
Okay. This is going to be a bit of a rapid-fire question and answer session because there's a lot of questions and there's no way we're going to get through them all, unfortunately. I know we have a hard out at 3. So I will keep them tight and you keep your answers tight and we'll deal with as many as we can.
I see what you're doing there. You're telling me to shorten my answers.
Yeah, the politician answers. First question comes from Mohammed Hashim, who says, Andrew Scheer has never said the word Islamophobia. Why?
I don't believe that's true. We had a motion in the House of Commons the other day where all parties supported that. Anybody who uses terms to try to paint a broad brush against an entire group of people, I reject anyone who would who would speak out based on Islamophobic principles, whether or not that's somebody who is trying to lump all people of the Muslim faith in together, or whether it's people who are trying to antagonize elements of society to have a more negative reaction to those who practice that faith. To me, the important thing is to speak out against those who in any way give oxygen or space to those who are trying to promote one group of people over the other. People who come to Canada, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Hindu, atheists, want to come here to live their life, and our charter and our constitution and our conventions protect people from all walks of life to enjoy the freedoms that we have here in Canada. Is that too long?
Close. Next one comes from a name many in the room will know, Aaron Woodrick, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Justin Trudeau broke his promise to balance the budget. Will you commit to balancing it if your party forms government after the next election?
So yes, we will balance the budget. Now, I'll be very quick on this. Of course, Justin Trudeau thought the budget would balance itself. We now see what happens with that. A lot of people say, well, how? Well, there's been such rapid increases in the rate of growth of government spending that we can get a lot of the way there just by restricting the growth of government spending back closer to inflation and population growth. There's some big ticket items that we disagree with. The Liberals philosophically, they put billions of dollars into an infrastructure bank that protects the profits of large corporations but puts all the risks on taxpayers. We don't agree with that. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which builds roads and bridges in other countries but doesn't build roads and bridges here in Canada. We believe our infrastructure money should go to improve the lives of Canadians here in Canada. So a combination of big ticket items with controlling the rate of growth, but the window really is October. This is the Kathleen Wynne playbook. Multiple years, 13 years of large deficits, making it very, very difficult to return to back to balanced budgets. We have a window this October that we can limit the damage and get back to balanced budgets over a shorter period of time.
I like how fast you're talking now. This is good. We're getting through a lot. The next question, and I think it's very interesting because there's been significant criticism of the current government over their promises to Indigenous people. They made a lot of big promises and they have made a lot of progress on some files, but there's an awful lot that remains to be done. This comes from Natasha Kornak, who asks, when Trudeau talked a lot about truth and reconciliation with Indigenous people, how do you plan to address the many issues faced by Indigenous communities, such as boil water advisories, suicide, addiction, and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls?
Well, it's really focusing on substance over style, and I think that's another key difference between Justin Trudeau and myself. You can look at the achievements that the previous Conservative government made in having tangible, measurable results when it comes to things like boil water advisories, investments in education. We can see now that and we support some aspects of what the government has proposed when it comes to doing things like protecting Indigenous languages. We think that there could be a role there for government to do that. But we also have to recognize that the best thing to do to help First Nations communities across the country is to ensure that they're able to participate in the economic growth and prosperity that this country has to offer. And so when we look at things, like the Northern Gateway Project, where there were dozens of First Nations communities who signed on to partnership agreements. When we look at all the groups, the Indigenous groups and bands that support Trans Mountain or that benefited from any number of energy projects, they need to have their voices heard too. And my commitment is to have meaningful consultations and to absolutely not just uphold the letter of the law when it comes to the duty to consult, but also the spirit of the law. But at the end of the day, in Canada, we have to be the type of country where things can get built. And we have to recognize that there are many, many people who have their opportunity to participate and benefit economically from these types of projects, that they're being prevented from being able to do that because some are blocking it on the other end. So a fair, open, and transparent process that, if it grants an approval, the project has to be able to go ahead.
And a related question coming out of that, which comes from Bernard Anderson, what practical steps would Andrew Scheer take to build pipelines?
That's a great question. I could go an hour on that one. Very, very quickly, I announced a comprehensive pipeline policy just before Christmas. It does things like fast track all jurisdictional questions to the Supreme Court early so that we get clarity on the front end instead of allowing provincial governments like British Columbia or other entities throw up injunction after injunction, further delaying it. Let's fast track all these references on the front end. Let's define in legislation what something that's in the national interest is, and clearly define based on our Constitution the federal jurisdiction over these types of projects. Also appointing a personal representative of the Minister of Indigenous Affairs so that that duty to consult is carried out properly. That's a Coles Notes repealing C-69, which is a pipeline killer, and removing the double standard on upstream and downstream emissions on new pipeline projects. That's what killed Energy East. The proponents of Energy East had to account for upstream and downstream greenhouse gas emissions. No other industry in Canada has to do that. And the oil that's coming over from Venezuela, from Algeria, coming in from the United States, none of those shipments have to account for upstream and downstream greenhouse gas emissions. So by removing that double standard, we can get these types of big projects built again.
I see we have a gentleman, the lone gentleman. Oh, does someone else? No, he's walking away. Just one at the microphone.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Robert Whistler. I'm from Kamloops, BC. I attend Thompson Rivers University. For starters, we would just want to invite you out and talk with our university. Trudeau did, and I'm sure you'd get a bigger crowd. I was wondering if you, when you become Prime Minister, if you'd be interested in opening the Constitution to address issues like the Senate, or adding new provinces like Turks and Caicos, or maybe making some new ones like Acadia, Northern Ontario, stuff like that, or any other issues that have been going on in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it being almost the end of March and still pretty chilly out there, the Turks and Caicos idea, I'd want to explore that a little more. I don't know though, because Justin Trudeau flew down to Florida and then back again just before the budget. I don't know how many greenhouse gas emissions he put in the atmosphere by doing that. If we had Turks and Caicos, then it might be tempting for him to do that even more. But of course, that won't be a problem after October, so maybe we should revisit it. But look, when it comes to Senate reform, I continue to believe that there should be Senate reform. I supported efforts like having elections for the Senate and term limits on senators. But I do have to say that based on the Supreme Court ruling, the threshold to achieve that is very, very high, and it would, based on those rulings, it would take an awful lot of effort to deal with the constitutional aspects of that, and that is something that is not something that I'm proposing in my time in office. I'm going to be focusing on the types of more practical things that we can achieve in the short term.
Okay, question is probably the last one we have time for, I think, because I'm getting notes saying we have to wrap at 3. Don't hate me. No. Nick Drain, question for Mr. Scheer. How do we show Canadians we care about the environment while maintaining our unwavering opposition to the carbon tax?
Well, we have to remember that the carbon tax is not an environmental plan. It is a revenue plan. And when Justin Trudeau is running around talking about making pollution free again, it's his carbon tax that has made pollution free for large industrial emitters, up to a 90% exemption for those industrial emitters that emit a significant amount into our atmosphere. It's making it more expensive for commuters and families in rural and suburban locations, but is actually not going to do anything for the environment. So our plan will be practical, it'll be achievable, and it'll speak to what Canada can do so well. It's never made any sense to me why we would chase away jobs and investment away from Canada, where we have better technology and higher environmental standards, only to see production and factories and facilities pop up in countries like China, where they don't have the same commitment to those standards that we do. A great example of that is aluminum. Thanks to our hydroelectricity and our tough standards here in Canada, we can make aluminum at a fraction of the emissions than are made in China, when they use a significant percentage of their electricity comes from coal-powered electrical plants. So it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't do the world any favors if global emissions actually go up because we chase that out of Canada. So we're going to have a comprehensive plan that speaks to meaningful reductions, investments in innovation and technology, and in incentivizing those emitters that are putting more into the atmosphere to make those reductions, as well as help for individuals and families who want to make things like their own home more energy efficient.
One last question squeezed in here, because I think it's of interest to a lot of people who are watching. It comes from Candice Jazvac. I hope I said your last name right. I apologize if I didn't. She says, seniors are the fastest growing demographic in the country. You've addressed retirement security and faith in pension plans in the coming election. How do you propose to take on those issues?
This is one of those ones that we are going to be very excited to unveil in the election campaign. It is a real anxiety. There are those who had pensions, who worked their whole life expecting their pension plan to be there, and they've had the rug pulled out from underneath of them. It's a real anxiety for people who don't have the ability to go back into the workplace and recuperate from that. Cost of living hits seniors very hard. We've looked at the effects on seniors from the carbon tax. That will disproportionately hurt those on fixed incomes and with fixed costs and without the ability to deal with those higher costs. So we have a couple of exciting proposals that you'll have to stay tuned for the campaign about strengthening savings for seniors and making sure that those programs that are in existence work better for them. So you'll have to, but the fundamental principle will be recognizing that seniors are an element in our society that when they get to a certain point in their life, just don't have the capacity often to go back and enter the workplace. I might have shared this story with you, but my father worked at the Ottawa Citizen. You know, we know what's happening in that industry. He's at the point now, he's in his 70s, if for whatever reason that pension plan is no longer there, he just doesn't have the ability to go back and start earning wages. So that's why it's so important that governments ensure that retirement programs, pension plans, the types of public services, the public pension aspects that we have are adequate, not just adequate, but robust to protect them when those types of things happen.
Well, that's almost all the time we have. Before we wrap, I have to ask you, because I know people in the room are curious, SNC-Lavalin, going forward, what is your plan on next steps? I know you're going to the Ethics Committee on Tuesday, but it's also Liberal dominated. What are your plans for next steps there in terms of trying to get answers?
Well, you're right. The Ethics Committee will start its investigation on Tuesday. We are calling on Justin Trudeau to cooperate with this investigation. We know that he shut down the Justice Committee investigation, but hope springs eternal. You know, we are going to put pressure on him, and I would encourage all of you to do that, because so far the only time that Mr. Trudeau reacts to anything is when he faces political heat for it. This is so incredibly important. We're talking about the integrity of our justice system, the supremacy of the rule of law. We talk about people coming to Canada from all over the world. One of the reasons why people come to Canada is because often they're fleeing the kinds of places where powerful politicians abuse the power of their office to reward their friends and punish their enemies in the justice system, who interfere in court cases. That's why we have to, all of us, fight so hard against this type of abuse. What we know for sure is that there is more to be said. Both Jody Wilson-Raybould and now Ms. Philpott have said that there are key facts and things that happen that Canadians need to know about. Justin Trudeau needs to fully lift the cabinet privilege that is preventing them from speaking and let them say what it is. Let Canadians decide. Right now, he's engaged in a cover-up the likes of which we've never seen. He's used $41 billion of new spending in his budget to try to distract from it, making it the most expensive cover-up in the history of cover-ups. He's used his majority to shut down the committee, and he just forced his MPs to vote for over 30 hours straight, all because he refused to allow them to complete their testimony.
Would you get rid of the DPA mechanism? Yeah, if you form government, do you think that it's useful, or do you think that it just shouldn't exist at all for big corporations?
So the issue is not about whether or not a DPA, whether or not a DPA is a good thing or not, is a conversation we could have had if they hadn't put that in the omnibus budget bill last year. The issue is that that tool is given to a Crown prosecutor, the Director of Public Prosecutions, as an option. It was a tool in her toolkit. Just like a judge has sentencing options when they're dealing with individuals. People can be sentenced to prison, to addictions counseling, different types of services. The key here is that politicians don't try to influence what tool is used. That we don't put pressure on judges, on prosecutors to say, hey, I know this guy, go for one of these deals or that deal. That is left in the hands of our courts and our law officers. And that is the fundamental problem with this scandal.
Okay. Well, that is all the time that we have. Thank you very much, Mr. Scheer, for taking the time to talk to us today. And I have a little administrative note for everyone before you head out here, which I'm opening so I can read it to you accurately. I believe it's that you're to come back here at 3:30. I'm not used to this app. This is the first time I've used it. Forgive me. Okay, here we go. If you could all have a quick networking break and go meet each other and have lovely chats, but return for 3:30 p.m. sharp, because that's when your next panel will be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great. Appreciate it.